The judge cleared her throat. The courtroom fell silent, and I handed her the printed email. The one Brandon's girlfriend sent me by mistake. It smelled like toner ink, still warm from the printer, and it burned hotter than anything I could have said out loud. She read aloud. Once Julia loses custody, we can push to sell the house. She won't fight back. The air cracked. Tara's face strained white. Brandon blinked once, twice, then looked down. I didn't raise my voice, didn't scream. I just watched the truth speak for itself. Where in the world are you listening from? Hit subscribe if you believe some betrayals deserve to be exposed. My name is Julia Collins. I'm 38, a night shift nurse in Minneapolis. And for the last 3 years, I've been a full-time mom to a little girl with a laugh that could break you open. Chloe is 7 now. She likes purple sneakers, hates vegetables, and thinks Band-Aids make everything better, even heartbreak. She was born during a thunderstorm. I remember the lights flickering, the sound of rain pounding the hospital windows, and then her first cry, stronger than any siren I'd ever heard. I work 4 nights a week at St. Mary's ER. Sometimes 5 when someone calls out or the budget gets slashed. But every morning at 7:45, I'm standing outside her school gate, tired but smiling. People call it sacrifice. I call it survival. This isn't the life I dreamed of, but it's the one I show up for every single day. We live in a 2-bedroom brick house on Nokomis Avenue. Not fancy, but it's ours. Aunt May left it to me when she passed, and I've held on to it like a lifeline ever since. The mortgage is paid, the kitchen tiles are cracked, the heater wheezes in winter, but it's home. There's a swing Chloe and I built together out back, crooked but hers. Lavender by the mailbox. Photos of our messy, beautiful life on every wall. Brandon, my ex, used to call it a starter home. Said we'd upgrade someday, but someday never came. He moved out when Chloe was 4. Fell in love with someone he met at an open house. A woman with long blonde hair, Pilates arms, and an Instagram of perfect smoothies, Tara. He's been living with her for about a year now in a high-rise with a rooftop gym, heated pool, and smart locks on every door. Chloe visits every other weekend. At first, she came back with stories of baking cookies and watching princess movies. Now she just shrugs when I ask. A few months ago, she started drawing pictures, stick figures of 3 people, her Brandon and Tara. I wasn't in them. At night, when the house gets quiet and the only sound is the hum of the fridge, I sit on the couch and wonder, is this how erasure begins? Not all at once, but in inches. One skipped bedtime story, one forgotten hug, one picture without my face. Then came the comment that froze my spine. Mom, she said one morning while tying her shoelaces, why don't we live somewhere nicer like Tara's place? Daddy says this house isn't really good for me. I stopped breathing. The house smelled like toast and lavender detergent, and suddenly it made me nauseous. I knelt beside her. What do you mean? She shrugged. Daddy says he might fix it so I can stay with him all the time. Then I'll have a real room. I tried to stay calm, but something cold settled into my chest. Brandon hadn't said anything about changes to custody. We shared joint custody on paper, and it had worked fine until now. The next week, his lawyer emailed me, said they wanted to discuss revisiting our co-parenting agreement. No reason given, just that. That was when the tightness started. In my jaw, my throat, my spine. I wasn't scared. I was getting ready. Because if they were planning something, they had no idea who they were messing with. It started with the way she stopped unpacking. Every Sunday night, Chloe would come home with her little pink overnight bag. She used to fling it open right away, pull out stuffed animals, crayon drawings, a new headband Tara had bought. She'd talk about what they made for breakfast, or how Tara let her paint her nails. But 2 months ago, she stopped unpacking. She'd set the bag down in the hallway, walk past it, like it wasn't hers. When I asked how her weekend was, she'd say fine, nothing else. Her drawings changed too. The lines got sharper. No more rainbows or stick figure pets. Just tall buildings, an elevator, a balcony, 3 people inside. Who's that? I asked, gently pointing to the tallest figure. Daddy, she said, and the lady Tara. And you? She shook her head. I don't live there. I laughed, awkward, forced. But you don't live with Daddy either, sweetie. You live here. She didn't respond, just pulled out another sheet of paper and started again. Same picture, same people. That night I stared at her in bed, her small shoulders rising and falling in sleep, her hand clutching a plush fox Brandon gave her years ago. My chest ached. The next morning it got worse. She sat at the table poking at her cereal, then said out of nowhere, Tara says, I'll have a real family soon, like a full one. I froze mid-step. What do you mean? She says you're tired all the time. That I need someone who can be there more. The spoon slipped from my hand. Milk splashed on the table. I wiped it slowly, my fingers shaking. Did Daddy say that too? She hesitated, then nodded. I didn't cry. Not in front of her. But something inside me cracked quietly, like porcelain under pressure. That afternoon I checked my email. There it was. Subject: Custody Adjustment Inquiry. From Koi, Brandon's lawyer. Line 1. Our client would like to revisit custody terms prioritizing child stability. I sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by crumbs, juice stains, and drawings without me in them. And I whispered, so this is how they do it. Not with force, with suggestion. One picture at a time, one planted word, one missing mother. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, stamped with the logo of a law firm I didn't recognize, delivered to my mailbox on a windy Tuesday morning. I knew it wasn't good the way it weighed in my hand, too heavy for anything kind. Inside, Brandon was petitioning for full custody of Chloe. The letter said I worked excessive night shifts, that my schedule was unpredictable and incompatible with the needs of a growing child. It claimed Chloe lacked stability in my care, that she expressed emotional detachment after weekends with me. I read it 3 times, same words, same lies. There was an entire section about my home, calling it structurally outdated, mentioning that Chloe lacked a private, modernized space. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about my daughter. This was about the house, the only asset I owned, left to me by Aunt May. The place Tara once called quaint, then cramped, then quietly to Brandon leverage. They weren't just trying to take Chloe, they were trying to force me out. If I lost custody, I'd have no reason to keep the house. If I sold, they'd argue Chloe belonged in the superior environment, the apartment with the rooftop pool. It was a strategy, not a request. I called my lawyer, the same woman who helped with the divorce, Miriam, sharp, unapologetic. She picked up on the second ring. They're building a case, I said. They're weaponizing my job, my house, even Chloe. She asked me to forward everything. Start writing things down, she added. Anything Chloe says, any messages from Brandon. Document it all. That night I found Chloe in bed whispering to her stuffed fox. I leaned in. She looked at me with sleepy eyes and said, Daddy says this place won't be mine for long. But I shouldn't worry, it's better that way. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Then I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and opened a blank document. Custody Journal, Day 1. Time 9:12 p.m. Quote, Daddy says this place won't be mine for long. I typed slowly, deliberately. If they wanted a case, I'd build one of my own. It came on a Thursday. I was between double shifts, half asleep on the couch with a cold compress on my neck, when my phone buzzed. A subject on floor plans plus a strategy. From I'm Tara Wellness. Studio@gmail.com. Julia.collins.n@gmail.com. I blinked, sat up, read it again. Tara. She'd emailed me by mistake. I opened the attachment, a PDF titled Custody Asset Strategy, Final Notes. My stomach turned. The first page looked like a brainstorm, bullet points, diagrams, arrows. My name in all caps. Chloe's name circled. And then halfway down. Once Julia loses primary custody, she'll have no legal grounds to retain the house. Brandon can file for financial restructuring. If she pushes back, leverage Chloe's statements wanting to live elsewhere. There was more. Ensure Chloe mentions how old the kitchen is, how cold it gets at night. Play up asthma if needed. Frame Julia's work schedule as unsafe. I couldn't breathe. On page 2, a mock Q&A between Brandon and their lawyer. It wasn't just strategy, it was a script. And then at the bottom of the email, send this version to Brandon only, do not forward to Julia. But she had. I stared at the screen, frozen. In the other room, Chloe hummed along to a cartoon. The scent of apple shampoo still lingered on her hair from the night before. Her backpack was on the floor. Her tiny sneakers beside it, the laces tangled the way she always left them. They thought I was alone, tired, vulnerable. They forgot what nurses know best, how to stay calm when blood is everywhere. I clicked download. Saved the file twice. Once in my custody journal folder. Once in a drive I named for court. Then I picked up my phone, opened my notes app, typed. She emailed the plan, their actual plan. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just whispered, you should have checked the to field, and closed the phone. I didn't reply to the email. Not that day, not the next. I waited. Let them think I hadn't seen it. Let them keep playing their game. But behind closed doors, I was documenting everything. I forwarded the email to Miriam, my lawyer. Subject line, evidence, from Tara. Attached the full PDF, added a note. They're coordinating Chloe's words. They're targeting the house. Miriam responded in under 3 minutes. Solid gold. Let's build. I went through my phone and pulled every text Brandon had ever sent about Chloe. Flagged the ones with passive digs. She says she never sleeps well at your place. Tara noticed Chloe's been coughing more when she comes back from yours. I opened Chloe's school app. Downloaded her attendance and performance reports. Proof she was thriving. I scanned Chloe's drawings. Cataloged the ones without me in them. Timestamped them. Wrote out what she'd said when I asked about each one. I even recorded myself every night after Chloe went to bed dictating what she told me during dinner, during bath time, while brushing her teeth. I wasn't just keeping a journal anymore. I was archiving a war. At Miriam's suggestion, I added timestamps to everything, screenshots with metadata, audio notes saved with exact dates, paper trails, long, detailed, undeniable. Then I backed it all up one folder on an external drive. One in the cloud, one printed and locked in my nightstand drawer. At night, I lay beside Chloe and watched her sleep. Watched the way her lips twitched when she dreamed, the way her fingers curled into fists. I used to wonder if I was enough. Now I knew I had to be more than that. I had to be prepared, because the next time we stood in court, it wouldn't just be about bedtime routines or property values. It would be about intent, and I would be ready to show them mine. The night before our first court hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Chloe, watching her chest rise and fall. She'd kicked off her blanket again. She always did that when she was nervous. I reached down, tucked it back up to her chin, then brushed a curl from her cheek. She didn't stir. I remembered the day she took her first steps. Brandon had cried filming her wobble across the living room in those little yellow socks. We'd both clapped like idiots, cheering as if she'd won Olympic gold. That memory used to make me smile. Now it tasted bitter, because I couldn't unsee the email. Couldn't unhear the things Chloe had been told. Couldn't forget how casually they'd used words like leverage and push her out. They weren't just trying to take my daughter. They were trying to erase me, and I'd spent too long being polite. Too long giving grace where none was earned. Too long thinking silence made me the bigger person. That night, I sat at the kitchen table lit only by the fridge light and the city glow outside. I opened the folder labeled "For Court." Looked at every file, every screenshot, every voice memo. I saw my effort, my motherhood, my proof. And I whispered this time out loud, I'm done waiting. Done hoping Brandon would grow up. Done assuming Tara would back off. Done giving them space to destroy me quietly. They wanted a clean break. I'd give them something cleaner. The truth. I didn't tell anyone. Not Brandon, not even Chloe. The night before court, I kissed her forehead like always, packed her lunch, folded her uniform as if nothing was about to shift. Because some wars aren't won with shouting. They're won in silence, with paperwork, with patience. The morning of the hearing, I wore navy. Not black too severe, not beige too soft. Navy says I am composed, I am listening, and I am not here to beg. Miriam met me outside the courthouse. She held a thin folder and a coffee I hadn't asked for. She's going to try to rattle you, she said. Don't blink. Inside the courtroom smelled like varnished wood and recycled air. Brandon sat with his lawyer laughing too loudly. Tara was there too, front row, high heels, red lips, not a single paper in hand. She looked bored, like she already knew the ending. I didn't look at her. The judge entered. We stood. Names were called, intentions were stated, and Brandon's side began their performance. They painted me as tired, as unavailable, as unstable. She works irregular hours, his lawyer said. She doesn't provide Chloe with the kind of consistency a child needs. I took notes with a calm hand. Miriam didn't flinch. They brought out photos, old ones of my cluttered kitchen screenshots, of Chloe napping on the couch, a single video clip where Chloe cried because she missed her dad. None of it illegal, none of it dangerous, just human. But that was the point. They weren't trying to prove I was unfit. They were trying to make me look less than Tara, less than their curated high-rise life. When it was our turn, Miriam stood. We have no intention of matching your client's dramatics, she began. But we do have documents, timelines, and a message accidentally sent that reframes this entire proceeding. She pulled out a printed copy of Tara's email, 1 page, plain font, no embellishments. She handed it to the clerk and asked calmly that this be entered into the record. Across the aisle, Brandon's smile cracked, and Tara finally looked up. The room shifted. Not immediately, but like a ripple, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. The clerk handed the email to the judge. She adjusted her glasses, read silently, her lips tightened by the second. Across from me, Brandon leaned toward his lawyer. They whispered. Tara looked confused until she saw the paper. Her face went white, one hand shot up to her chest. Not dramatic, just instinct. Miriam stayed still, her hands folded, her voice neutral. For the record, she said, "This email was sent by Ms. Tara Bellows to my client, Ms. Collins, on the morning of April 6th. Attached was a document titled Custody Asset Strategy, Final Notes. The content clearly demonstrates an intent to manipulate custody for material gain." She paused. "We will provide metadata, timestamps, and if necessary testimony from digital forensic analysts." The judge nodded slowly, then looked at Brandon. "Do you have a response?" His lawyer cleared his throat. We were not aware of this communication. We'll need to review its authenticity." "You'll have time," the judge said. "But for now, consider the motion for full custody." Paused. That word paused hit harder than any denied. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just exhaled finally. Behind me, I heard a whisper. Brandon's mother. She was sitting 2 rows back. She wet-scented herself. Someone shushed her. Tara got up and left the courtroom. Her heels clacked against the marble like a metronome counting down a collapse. Brandon watched her go, didn't move. The judge adjourned the hearing, requested a second session within 2 weeks this time to review the intent and strategy behind custody proceedings. Outside the courtroom, Brandon caught up to me. "Julia," he said, voice low, "this isn't how it was supposed to go." "No," I agreed. "It was supposed to go quietly, right?" He didn't answer. Behind him, his lawyer rubbed his temple. Tara was nowhere in sight. I stepped past him, stopped only once to look him in the eye and say, "You shouldn't have used her." He blinked. "You mean, Tara?" I tilted my head. "No, Chloe." Then I walked out, into the air, into the light, into control. 2 days after the hearing, I printed 5 copies of the strategy email. One for the judge, one for Miriam, one for the Family Court Review Board, one for my own records, and one for a woman named Elise Howard. She was Brandon's first divorce attorney and also his ex-wife's sister. I'd met her once briefly at a PTA fundraiser when Chloe was still in preschool. She handed me a juice box for Chloe and said, "Just so you know, you can do better than Brandon." I sent her the email with a short note. "For your awareness, things don't change, just the tactics." Then I sent another package, this one to Chloe's school counselor. Inside, printouts of the PDF, transcripts of things Chloe had said, a request for monitored language around custody discussions, and a note, "Please don't tell a 7-year-old she's changing homes, especially when it's not true." The last envelope I mailed wasn't addressed to a person. It was for a nonprofit, Minnesota Parental Equity Coalition. They'd helped moms like me navigate gray areas when the courts got political, when lawyers played dirty, when reputations were smeared without consequence. I didn't expect them to act right away, but I wanted the record to exist. Wanted someone somewhere to know how far Brandon and Tara had been willing to go. Back home, I found Chloe on the porch swing. She was drawing again this time, just her standing in front of a house with a heart in the window. I sat beside her. "What you working on?" I asked. She smiled. "This is me and Mommy's house. It's staying." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, baby, it is." That night, I uploaded everything to a secure folder in the cloud, gave Miriam access, and for the first time in weeks, I turned off my phone and slept through the night. No alarms, no notes, no whispers in the dark. Only a plan finished, filed, and waiting. The second hearing wasn't like the first. No chuckles, no confident suits, no Tara, just Brandon, alone, tapping his pen like it could undo what was coming. The courtroom was colder this time. The lights felt harsher. Even the judge looked tired of games. She cleared her throat. "We've reviewed new documentation submitted by Ms. Collins' legal counsel. In particular, a message sent from the girlfriend of Mr. Brandon Reed, which lays out a calculated strategy to manipulate custody." Brandon shifted in his seat. His lawyer didn't even glance at him. The judge continued, "The content of the email combined with metadata and supporting testimony demonstrates a clear attempt to discredit the mother not for Chloe's well-being, but for financial and housing advantage." She paused, then said evenly, "This court does not tolerate the use of a child as leverage." You could hear a pin drop. Even the court reporter's fingers slowed. Miriam stood, requested to submit one last item. A statement from Chloe's school counselor confirming the child had been pressured into comments about moving out and starting over. The judge nodded, turned to Brandon. "Do you have anything to say?" He stood, straightened his jacket, and said, "I was just trying to give my daughter a better life." Miriam didn't even blink. She said softly, "By removing her mother and selling the only home she's ever known." Brandon looked down. The judge delivered her ruling like it weighed nothing, but it shattered the air between us. "Buying custody shall remain joint in name, but primary physical placement is awarded to the mother. The minor child shall not be relocated without written consent. Further, Mr. Reed is barred from making unilateral educational or housing decisions. She paused, then added, Court recommends supervised visitation until further notice, and this court will initiate a formal review of custody manipulation charges. Brandon sat, didn't speak, didn't look at me. Because he knew the house wasn't his. Chloe wasn't a pawn. And I was no longer silent. It didn't all fall apart at once. That's not how these things go. They unravel slowly, thread by thread, lie by lie, until there's nothing holding the story up. The week after the hearing, Brandon stopped showing up for pickups. He sent his sister once awkward silent. She didn't look me in the eye. 3 days later, I heard from Elise, the ex-attorney turned ex-relative. Tara moved out, her message said. She took Elise 2 counties over, left no forwarding number. The nonprofit I'd contacted. They reached out too, said they were compiling Brandon's case into their next quarterly report on custody coercion through housing pressure. His name wouldn't be censored. But the loudest consequence wasn't public. It wasn't legal. It was Chloe, the way she started drawing me again. The way she curled up beside me on the couch without hesitation. The way she whispered one night, I'm glad I stay here more now. I don't like when people make me say things. I hugged her tight, didn't ask for more. The judge's order came in the mail on official paper. Black ink, gold seal, cold but clean. The house stayed mine. The parenting plan was locked. And Brandon. His lawyer formally withdrew representation 2 weeks later. I never heard from Tara again. Some friends said I should have sued, gone for full custody, dragged him through every courtroom in the state. But I didn't want a trophy. I wanted peace. Instead of revenge, I chose proof. Instead of screaming, I built a file. And instead of trying to make him pay, I made him irrelevant. The swing in the backyard is still crooked. The tiles in the kitchen still need replacing. But now when I sit at that table, there's no fear, just cereal bowls, homework, little purple shoes left under the radiator. Last week, Chloe brought home a writing assignment. Prompt: describe your safe place. She drew our house with 2 stick figures, one big, one small, both smiling. She wrote, this is where we tell the truth, and nobody gets taken away. I didn't cry, not then, but when she went to bed, I opened the folder one last time, scrolled through the screenshots, the evidence, the email, and I hit delete, because this fight was over. And silence this time wasn't fear, it was victory. 6 months later, the swing out back still creaks on windy nights. The lavender by the mailbox is blooming again, and Chloe's drawings now always include the sun. I didn't move, didn't paint over anything, didn't replace the kitchen tiles like I once planned, because every imperfection here tells a part of what we survived. Brandon still has visitation rights, but he doesn't use them often. The last time he called, he asked if we could start fresh. I told him we already did. You just weren't invited. Miriam says I'm one of her quietest wins. She's helping me take courses now on family law. Not because I want to be a lawyer, but because I want to help women like me who've been told they're tired, emotional, unstable, when really they're just exhausted from carrying everyone else. Some people ask if I ever forgave him. The truth is, there wasn't space for forgiveness, only clarity. And clarity is more permanent than anger. Chloe asked last week if we could repaint her room, purple this time, with stars on the ceiling. She said it's mine, right? No one can take it away. I smiled. No one, I said. And if they try, you know what to do. She nodded, then handed me a paintbrush. So we painted, with the windows open, music playing, and laughter spilling down the hall. Because healing doesn't always look like letting go. Sometimes it looks like holding on. Firmly, quietly, unapologetically. Have you ever had to stand your ground against someone you trusted? Tell me your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe because the next story might be yours.